Okay, let's call the town council meeting of May 13, 2025 to order. Jennifer, will you take roll?
Councilmember Alberish.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Gold. Councilmember Wall. Mayor Domkowski.
Here. Councilmember Brown, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, Dick. This evening, we are closing a chapter of our leadership book, and we're honored to have an elected official and members of elected officials' esteemed staff with us today to formally recognize Town Manager Bryant and for his leadership with the town of Woodside and throughout and across San Mateo County. I would like to begin with Supervisor Mueller. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. So Kevin, Town Manager Bryant, and looking,
Very formal.
we could say Kevin, it is, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I wouldn't have missed it. As you know, from the business of town manager, it's pretty rare a town manager lasts more than 5 years anywhere. And to last 13 years is such a huge accomplishment. And to be here even longer, it really speaks to who you are. When I think of you, there are so many adjectives that I would use that really comes down to such conscientious professionalism. And to have gone through as many different city council members as you've had here in this community. And there's been, at least according to this, quite a few. And the accomplishments that you've had, and you've always, there's never been a story about where you haven't comported yourself in the most professional way. And I can tell you as a supervisor and from the county, how wonderful that is to look at a city and know that it's just being really well run. And so on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, I have a resolution for you here tonight, and I'm not going to read it. I'll save everyone that. But I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. Kevin, are you speaking on behalf of Assemblymember Berman? Or you all are for both state senators? Okay. Well, welcome everyone from State Senator Becker and Assemblymember Berman's offices. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mayor Domkowski and City Council. We're so pleased to be here tonight to honor City Manager Bryant. Our bosses, Senator Becker and Assemblymember Berman, wish they could be here, but as you may know, they're in Sacramento. Right now, they're in the heat of the legislative session, and so they asked us to be here on their behalf. But speaking from a staff standpoint, I think I can speak for Kevin and Wendy and myself to say that at least in our Senate district, we represent 35 cities now, and so we work with a lot of city managers. And I can say that I've been here doing this a long time. Before I was with Senator Becker, I was with Senator Jerry Hill and did a lot of work down in this part of the district. And it's really always been wonderful to work with you and your incredible staff, your responsiveness, your flexibility, you're willing to work with your state representatives and your state agencies, Caltrans mostly, PG&E, not a state agency, but the stuff that we've gone through with them and some of the tough times. And so we really have appreciated that partnership with your office and of course your city council and your city staff. So we do have a resolution that was drafted up in Sacramento by our legislative council. We will not read the entire document. However, we will read a small part of it that sort of sums up the thanks that we have for you here today. All right.
so here's the resolution. And whereas, as a result of his tireless hard work and unwavering commitment to the town of Woodside, Kevin Bryant has compiled an impressive record of career and civic achievements, one that has earned him the sincere admiration and respect of those who have had the privilege of associating with him. Now, therefore, be it, sorry.
Okay. Resolved by Senator Josh Becker and Assemblymember Mark Berman that all best wishes for a long, happy, and healthy retirement be conveyed to Kevin Bryant, along with sincerest thanks and appreciation for your many years of dedicated service, dedicated and exemplary service to the people of Woodside and the state of California. I'm going to turn it over to Joan, who has this.
Well, so when we do this, we send this language to the bunch of lawyers in Sacramento that call the Legislative Council. And they put this together based on your CV and the work that you've done here in the town of Woodside. But what we heard in our research was that David Byrne was also asked to come in and help out from the Talking Heads to add some language to this. So there was a line that was added, and it's a little bit outside of the norm for what a state representative would normally put into this. But is it okay if we read it? Okay.
Absolutely.
Is that all right, Jennifer? We're
We-
okay. It's clean.
We're
Okay.
curious.
Okay. You may find yourself living in an unpermitted ADU, and you may find yourself in another sinkhole on Highway 84, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large Caltrans backhoe, and you may find yourself in a beautiful town with a beautiful staff and lots of bikes and horses, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? And how the hell do I get out of here? From Once in a Lifetime, the original lyrics were slightly like that. So on
Excellent.
behalf of
Excellent.
Becker and Berman, we would like to just thank you for all of your work. Congratulations.
Yeah, good say. That's a good question. Thank you very much. That was incredibly charming. Last but not least, from your civic family here in Woodside, we do have a formal proclamation to read, and at our level, we still read our proclamations. So this is a proclamation recognizing 20 whereases, by the way, so buckle up. Recognizing Kevin Bryant on the occasion of his retirement from the town of Woodside and presenting him with a Woodside Honor Coin. Whereas Kevin Bryant was born and spent the first 18 years with his family in Damariscotta, Maine, reading books, playing basketball, and listening to Red Sox games on his transistor radio late into the evening. And whereas, after graduation from Medomnock, I'm trying here, high school, Kevin earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of Southern Maine in 1993 and a Master's of Regional Planning degree from the University of North Carolina in 1998, where he met his partner in life, Junko Peterson. And whereas, in June of 1998, Kevin and Junko made their way west to California. And Kevin began his public sector career, serving 4 years as a planner 1, 2, and 3 with the city of Alameda, 3 years as an advanced planner with the town of Tiburon, and 2 years as an assistant town manager with the city of Sausalito. And whereas in February 2008, Kevin began his tenure in the town of Woodside when he accepted the position of assistant to town manager. And on September 4th, 2008, Kevin was promoted to the position of assistant town manager. And whereas in 2011, Kevin, along with 94 other candidates, applied for the position of town manager. And at the end of a rigorous interview process, Kevin was chosen by the council to serve as town manager effective January 14, 2012. And whereas during Kevin's tenure, he has been a calm and steady leader, regardless of the challenges he faced. Whereas those challenges included wildfires, the effects arising from unprecedented winter storms, and the COVID-19 pandemic, which fundamentally altered the way in which essential government services were delivered. And whereas Kevin, with grace and quiet determination, led the town through the ever-changing landscape of state housing mandates, culminating in the council's approval of the town's Cycle 6 housing element. And whereas Kevin also played an instrumental role in assuring that residents have places to enjoy the natural beauty of Woodside by assisting in restoring Kite Hill and maintaining Barclay Park. And whereas Kevin has also promoted arts and culture in Woodside through his support of First Friday events, Day of the Horse, May Day Parade and Fun Run, Soapbox Derby, and by advocating for expanded programs and services provided at the Woodside Library. And whereas Kevin has worked cooperatively with the Woodside Fire Protection District to promote programs aimed at reducing the risk of wildfires and supported the establishment of EPIC, which has trained residents to assist in responding to other natural disasters. And whereas Kevin's door has always been open to staff and residents, we treated with respect and kindness. And whereas during his tenure as town manager, Kevin also served as president of Plan JPA, the Joint Powers Authority responsible for providing insurance coverage for the 30 cities in Northern California, and served as the chair of the San Mateo County Library Operations Committee, almost there. And whereas during his tenure, Kevin has supported and carried out the policies established by town councils consisting of a total of 18 council members. And whereas during his tenure, he has attended 333, interesting number, special and regular council meetings and attended countless committee meetings. And whereas during his tenure, he has prepared 13 annual budgets and the town has received 13 unqualified audits. And whereas Kevin has also demonstrated, measured, and unwavering support for the town staff as they deliver services to the residents and businesses in Woodside. And whereas Kevin has chosen to retire and now looks forward to the opportunity to spend more time with his wife, Junko, daughters, Hannah and Emmy, and other family and friends. And whereas it has been said that a good leader takes a little more than his share of the blame and a little less than his share of the credit. And whereas it has also been said by fellow Maine native Edmund Muskie, there's no point in speaking unless you can improve on silence. And whereas by these and any other measures, Kevin has demonstrated excellent leadership to the town council, town staff, the residents and businesses in the town of Woodside, earning the right to a well-deserved retirement. Now, therefore, I, Brian Domkowski, Mayor of the Town of Woodside, on behalf of the Town Council and town residents, do hereby sincerely thank Kevin Bryant on the occasion of his retirement from the Town of Woodside and do hereby award Kevin Bryant an honor coin for his years of service to our community. Thank you very much, sir. You can stick it if you want to. One for your desk, and of course, one, of course, about fireplace. But yeah, everybody wishes you well. Something tremendous. So, let's take a picture here. Yeah.
All right, 3, 2, 1. That's good.
Do you want to get all staff in? I'll take it. Yeah. Yeah. No problem. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. There you go. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you all. Really, really appreciate it. Okay. Well, where do you go from there? Well, you go right on to public comment. Are there any members of the public here that would like to speak on any item not on the posted agenda? Thank you. Hi, Ms. Hanson.
Hi, Kim Hansen on Raymundo. Um, Congratulations, Kevin. Really enjoyed your party on last Friday. And at that party, I had some really fascinating and interesting conversations. And it was really apparent the different perspectives that we have. When I come in front of you, like these are my shoes, right? Like walk a mile in, I think we all need to walk a mile in each other's shoes. Like there were conversations that we had where it wasn't, wow, Kim is engaged. Kim, I'm the only one here from our citizen group that came to talk to you. And I hope that we can make a point to be more engaged in the future. I see, you know, in the work plan review that the consultants that we've hired, we spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on consultants every year for the town of Woodside. And these consultants don't live in Woodside. And I hope that we can do more to keep the citizens engaged. The mayor-elect for Oakland has a bunch of citizen work groups that she is going to plan to do. And I really think we need to look at each other when people come to town council meetings or join volunteer committees. It's because they care and they're engaged. There were some conversations on Friday where there's this impression that, oh, here comes a citizen who's not going to let me get through my agenda. Here comes a citizen who makes my job hard. Here comes people to these meetings because they're pissed off. It's not they're engaged. It's not that they care. It's not that they're worried about something about their own, walking in their own shoes, like their health and safety, their retirement, fire danger, insurance, their homes. It's like, oh, this person is here because they're pissed off. And I really hope that moving from here as a town, we all care about each other. We all really have a common goal, I would hope. And I hope that we can all look at each other and think about our perspectives from other people's shoes, because people that participate are here because they're engaged and they care. They're not trying to make life more difficult. So I look forward to this next session of discussions, especially with the town center plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Kim. Anyone else? All right, hearing none, we'll close public comment and move on to the town manager report. Kevin.
This is time for my rebuttal, right? No, tonight I just want to say, I just want to say I really appreciate the support that I have had from the 18 people in that photo. I'm still blown away by that. That's amazing. Given how scattered that group has become, very cool. But you know, obviously this, you know, I took this job and there were seven people decided I was up to it, and I've had the fortune to serve with many more than that original 7, and I've always felt as supported, if not more so, by the folks that followed the original 7 as I did by them, and it certainly includes the current group. And so I just want to take this opportunity to and reflect back what was said here this evening, and thank you. And know that that's something that's going to be, I'm sure that's part of the attraction of this job, and I know something that my successor, Jason, will also appreciate and benefit from. Not every council member in every city provides that kind of support to their management and their management team, and it's noted and appreciated. That's all I want to say.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions or comments, Kevin? Hearing none, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Any items on the consent agenda that anyone would like to pull for further discussion? This one is, okay. We get a motion on the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Alberish,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Gold,
Yes.
Councilmember Wall, Mayor Domkowski.
Yes, thank you. Moving right along. And to Kim's earlier comments, it's not quite a barn burner tonight. Budget discussions rarely are, but we're going to hand things off to you, Kevin, to take us through presentation, at least the introduction of the proposed budget for 25-26 and discussion around pension and CIP, presumably.
Yes, and I actually have, I've got a very just brief couple of comments about the budget. It may be by virtue of, somebody mentioned 13, I think this is number 14. This budget maintains all of our services, all of the programs that the town has had historically, things like the Defensible Space Matching Fund Program, support for the Chipper Program, all the things that we do. We do so by maintaining, we still are bringing in revenues that cover those basic services and those additional services that we have done in past years. And in projecting out, looking out, the budget includes a 10-year forecast for the general fund. And through year 6, we still maintain that 30% reserve. And it's, I would say, front-loaded in the near term for the additionals, which are the support for our CIP for infrastructure work, and also the kind of the big ticket items that we're able to do. And Kim mentioned Town Center Area Plan is this year's big one that council will start engaging with next month. So the fiscal condition, the financial situation of the town remains very strong. I think all of the budgets that I've done over the years have been, I think, maybe almost too conservative in that when you look at this 10-year plan, you see that it's spent down over time. But if you go back 5 years, you'll see that it has the same profile, meaning that as we come out of each year, we tend to be better off than we were conservatively going into that year. So I think there will still be some options for the town going forward as things arise that we need to address. And the challenges coming before you, as you know, are different than the ones that we have faced in the past, particularly around state mandates. The two things I wanted to mention about this, there are 2 items I want to call your attention to in the CIP. One, you have received a lot of comments about, and we've talked a little bit about in this room, that we've added a project and a line item and allocated out of this budget $1 million from both the general fund and 2 of our road funds to do stability work, so stability enhancement work on a portion of Hillside Drive that we have been working on and focused on. That's roughly from about 231 Hillside Drive and 303 Hillside Drive. Yaz is working with our geotech consultants who have gone out and done field work. They're currently working on design options to address providing those roads, really building them out for the next 30 to 50 years. And I think that's going to require us to, at a minimum, take the road off that area, build some improvements underneath and put the road back. And maybe some additional work around on the side of the hill, but that is still taking shape. But it's in the budget. I think it became clear to both of us during this year that that's something that needs to be done in the near term, which is why it's, in this year's budget and for this year coming up. And again, we're in the position to be able to do that and still do the other things that we need. The other addition to the CIP is one that I'm going to say I'm a little bit more ambivalent about. It's a recommendation that came out of the Circulation Committee after some discussion there, and not a unanimous recommendation. And it's an idea and a concept that has been around as long as I've been around, and that is, as I think you were all aware, that the town constructed about 10 years ago, or in phases starting about 10 years ago, a path project on Woodside Road, which requires that we get approval from Caltrans to do that. But we built a Woodside path, so it's not strictly a crosswalk. It's got a surface that's also favorable for equestrian travel. But we've got a path that runs from the elementary school down to the crossing at Woody the Fish. We've got a connection across Woodside Road with our lighted crosswalks, including and we pointed this out to the town center consultants, that our crosswalks, a lot of them have an equestrian version. So if you're on a horse, you can push a button up higher, which they took note of. But the decision was made about 15 or about 10 years ago to focus on the south side of Woodside Road because there were fewer constraints, there were fewer issues that need to be dealt with there. And that's why we built a whole program around getting people or getting kids, anyone who wanted to go down Woodside Road, across the road at Woody and down the south side of Woodside Road. The idea of and the desire for, which I can understand, would be something similar on the north side. So we have put in the CIP, and you could certainly take this out or move it to future years, but I've put in the CIP with no funding, just identified it as an unfunded project, a path project or an exploration of a path project on the north side. So that would basically take you from Woody. The idea would be to Albion, across from to Albion Road, across from the elementary school. The price tag would be about our estimate, and I mean, this is very early, so this is very much a rough estimate at the beginning, but it would be about twice the cost of what we did on the south side. And the main issue on the north side of the road is that's the drainage side. That's where water flows. And so work in that area would require us to do a lot of subsurface work to actually construct something. So you're talking about new pipes or new conveyances. So it would be a pricey project. And it's one that going forward, if it was to remain in the CIP, it's one that I would recommend. It may be a good candidate for grants. We did get a lot of grant funding for the south side work. I mean, there are monies from other sources that support safe routes projects. And additionally, just in line with my philosophy, grant money spent on improvements that we make in the Caltrans right away feels like the right balance of resource allocation to me versus things that we do on our own rights of way, spending our own dollar and not always relying on or not waiting for grant opportunities. So those are my thoughts on that. I wasn't planning on going through the whole budget. If to me there's, and maybe I've been too close to it for too long, but it's outside of these additions and the money that's supporting town center area plan and some engineering studies that we're still rolling out and doing. Everything else, but there are no real major operational changes that I'm recommending. Certainly I may way out the door. And Jason coming in will probably not want to be tackling major operational changes right away anyway. So you're looking maybe at next year's budget, it may look a little different, but I'm happy to take any questions on anything in the document. But
Do you want to,
that's
given
where
that little A, B, and C are all under the same? item, you
yeah,
wanna
sorry.
speak
So
on little
if,
B?
yeah, so if I'm going to pivot to the other discussion that was tipped up or council meeting, or this is the way you're referring to the pension topic, right? This was brought up, I think, a meeting or two ago, and there was interest on the council in visiting this. You may recall that during COVID, or actually, I think if I remember the sequence correctly, let me go back to the way beginning. About 15 years ago, there were new rulings in GASB, that's the Government Accounting Standards Board, which required cities to start putting on their books liabilities related to other benefits for retirees. And for the town of Woodside, that's retiree health. And that started a process where a lot of cities decided that there was a way that the GASB ruled that if cities started putting money away to kind of prepay that liability going forward, they could reduce the amount they booked again on their financial statements. That has since changed over time, but there was a strong incentive back in 2009-10 for cities to start putting money away. Something that a lot of cities, including Woodside, didn't do. For retiree health, it was just a pay-as-you-go, and the amount in those times were also less. But the town elected in 2009 to start one of those programs. They funded it, and that's the OPEB that you see in all the reporting. And right now we have around $1.5 million in that fund. we again, we are pay-as-you-go, so we're not drawing that down now, and for the foreseeable future, don't need to do so, but that, we're about 50% funded on the actuarial liability for retiree health. So that's one bucket. We also made the decision, going back, I don't know, 5, 6 years, maybe longer, to put money into a pension trust fund. This is allowed under IRS Section 125, and you'll see those terminologies as well. The way that, very broadly, the way that the retirement system works, very relevant, right, for me tonight, but the way the retirement system works is we have a contract with with CalPERS, the California retirement system, and CalPERS runs retirement for cities, state agencies, for state teachers. They're different programs, and they also produce annual actuarials. And what we've heard for the last 15 plus years is that cities they're funded at a level somewhere, depending on the year, anywhere from between, say, 60 and 75%. I would say a majority of cities, and that fluctuates. CalPERS invests, tries to beat market, all those things. And the town, on its CalPERS actuarial, we're funded at about 70%, and that goes up and down over years. But that's with money that has been contractually provided to CalPERS. And that's something we're contractually obligated to do, and we do it. We pay it. We pay a big lump sum at the beginning of the year for unfunded liability, and we also pay a portion. We pay an amount every payroll for what's known as the normal contribution, but that pays. And important for people to hear and understand and note is that as employees, we also contribute a part of our salary. It's sort of like a Social Security tax. We pay into that system as well. But the town elected to supplement that with a trust fund that was to be set aside and to be used only for pension liabilities. And back in 2019, 2000, we had a plan to put $1.8 million over 3 years into that plan. COVID hit, and we decided rather than do 600,000 a year as was our original plan. I think we put in the initial 600. I think COVID hit, market dropped, and that first summer we decided that was an opportunity to accelerate our contributions, and we added the other 1.2, and that has since grown to, depending on the day, we're now at somewhere around 2.6, 2.7, maybe a little higher now that we're back. And also in the last couple of years, we originally went with a 70-30 equities to bond portfolio. We made a modification to go to a 60-40 about a year ago. Which brings us to the last month or so, which is when we had another correction market. And I think the idea was, should we be once again contributing money into that fund? Just to give you a sense, it's hard to make comparisons across cities because other cities may have different tiers, different plans. Not every city has the same retirement formula. It's really difficult, but very broadly, we did look at our other agencies in San Mateo County, and if you add where we are with CalPERS and the money we have in our trust, we are among, if not the best funded for our pension liability. So we're in very good shape. Again, when you're looking forward, that's very important because that's going to open up, to go back to the budget document for just a quick second. The 10-year forecast tracks the pension the pension trust money, but it tracks them separately. So then in those out years when we're at 30% or even lower than 30% in terms of our reserve being less than 30% of our operating revenue, nowhere do we anticipate that we'll take money out of that pension trust fund and pay those liabilities. So we're actually in better shape even than what we show in that. Which brings us to tonight and the question of, do we want to move ahead with an additional contribution to our pension trust? And for discussion purposes, I put $1 million as a suggested talking point. It could be any number. The other thing I did attach to this document is just to show what it does to our 10-year, to our 10-year forecast. And of course, it draws down our undesignated reserve in future years. But we have enough lead time we're not going to be in a cash crunch over the next several years to do the things that we need or want to do. So I think it's a move that we could make, just understanding that once those dollars move into the pension trust, we're spending them on pension. And then you'd spend less of general fund on pension and use that money to do other things. Hopefully that makes some sense. And with that, I will take questions on.
Okay, questions for Kevin on any element of the budget? Want to go first?
Kevin, how confident are you of the availability of outside funding going forward compared to where it has been up till now? I heard from Supervisor Mueller that the county is losing over $600 million of state and federal funding, which is going to hit us hard. I know we already have a bridge that's postponed because we don't have any outside funding for that. And that I'm concerned about our ability to do projects that we're planning on getting paid back for out of our own pocket. Number one. I don't see any new revenue sources in your plan. Do you have any ideas? Is there anything in the plan that would be new sources of revenue?
I do not have any I don't have in this budget any new revenue sources. And related to your second question, a lot of what we do, if not most of what we do, we fund locally. We're not reliant on, for instance, the Hillside Drive, which is a big $1 million ad, that's all our money. So we're not relying on any outside agency to fund that. Town Center Plan is all our money. We're not relying on any outside money to fund that. There are, as we look in maybe in some out years, we've got applications in through Congressman Liccardo's office for a couple of projects that would be funded by congressional funding, but those would be dependent upon those. Those would be dependent upon those being funded by Congress, and I think I feel like pretty strongly that we'll get at least one of those related to our defensible space or our hazard mitigation work. But in part because I can tell you, there are other cities that are talking about, once again, they're in a position where they've got structural deficits that they're dealing with, and they're talking about either sales tax measures or TOT measures or parcel taxes. And this happens maybe more frequently than one would like, but I go to these meetings and there's kind of a roundtable where people are trying to understand what's going to be on the ballot where they might fit into that. And I don't see the need for it, not in the next 5 years, that we need to find an additional dedicated revenue source, like a parcel tax, or a local sales tax. I mean, I think those would be the two that we'd have at our disposal. We don't have hotels, so there's no option to tax hotel rooms.
Do we have any forecast of what our requirements may be for new sewer lines for all the new construction that's going on? Runnymede, for example, if we're going to do something there,
Well,
where did that funding come from?
sewer line extensions are paid by projects. So when we're speccing out the development on Runnymede, that is part of that project. Extension of a sewer line is part of that project.
So it wouldn't come out of our budget. It would come out of
This,
the
yeah, the sewer funds are they're enterprise funds. So they're separate from the general fund budget.
Okay, what about roadway construction to handle all the added traffic?
Well, again, I don't see that we're going to be adding a lot of new roads. We will get some increment. Any property tax increase, we get some increment. We get funds from construction projects that's one of the funds that supports the road program. So there is a certain amount of, there will be more revenue that just comes with more activity. that goes into that goes into the hopper, for lack of a better term.
Okay, and if we move forward with some kind of a town center plan, where would that funding come from?
Well, again, it will depend on what comes out of that. A lot of, I think a lot of the potential there is on, I'll call it freeing up private owners to do maybe different things on their properties. So it's not a matter of, or it's not necessarily a matter of town funding, town funding a project on a private property. But a successful town center plan that makes improvements to, say, pedestrian mobility. And, you're looking, this is a 20-year plan, so you're looking over a long period of time. But a plan that's adopted, that has community support, makes the town much more competitive for grant funds for projects that improve bicycle and ped mobility. That's where that money tends to go. So the plan puts us in a better position to compete for those monies, because it's tied to something that's very kind of clear versus something that's we did a Safe Routes to School audit back in 2012, which was the basis for some of our successful applications. So I think town center plan will serve the same function for us.
Wall?
Maybe I'll start with just a clarifying question. Can you help me understand, maybe benefit of my fellow council members too, what's the difference or the distinction between the town road program and the road rehabilitation program?
The road rehabilitation program is part of our road program. So when I refer, and it's a good broad-based question. When I refer to the road program, I mention it, or it's distinct from our general fund, which is sales tax, fees, property tax for general government purposes, which we use some of that money for road work as well. But the town has 5 distinct funds, all of which have to be used for road work. And taken together, that is the road program. So no one of those fund sources by itself can do everything that we need to do. So we think about them together, as the 5 funds together make up the road program. And so they fund salaries for some portion of Yaz and his staff, the crew, take into account for the work they do, but it also helps to fund distinct projects. So it's, to be very specific on the road, every year we do a road rehabilitation program, and it's about 60% funded out of general fund, and we combine that with money that we get for gas tax. We're basically required to spend it on the road rehab program. And so that together delivers that project. So one is a subset of the other.
And maybe just a follow-up question on there. So is it the case that Hillside Drive was on the list for road rehab, but Yaz and his team have since gone there and evaluated the situation and engaged with engineers, and the condition of the road is such that it's sort of in such a deteriorated state that it no longer just a candidate for road rehab, but actually merits its own CIP project?
No, I wouldn't put it exactly that way. I think going into this year's road rehab project, we already knew that Hillside was going to need, the Hillside project, the way we have it budgeted, is about twice of what our road rehab project would be. So we knew that it was a bigger project, kind of a standalone project. So it was more akin to us who, it's not the same thing, but it's more like a bridge project, or it needs to have its own timeline, its own contract, its own management. Whereas the road rehab is more, I would call it more routine maintenance. In some years, I don't think this is one of those years, but in some years we can do major targeted rehabilitation, and we have done that on small sections of road. But I think this one, we just knew it was going to require more than the road rehab project would allow for. So we're going to give it its own project and manage it separately.
Okay. And then, one more question actually related to the org chart. I know looking at, I know historically, Kevin, you have sort of been the department head of the finance and administrative department. And, you know, with the new town manager, you know, Jason might elect to make changes or not, who knows? But if we did want to slot in a director into that spot, does this budget allow for that?
It does. It does. I think the mechanism that you would do, this budget is built on, because this is what we have before us, it's built on this org chart and this staffing. But I think if I go back, I'm going to say probably half the budgets that we've had, we've made modifications through the year. I mean, we had this conversation in the past when we talked about a promotion to a deputy town clerk. And I've already shared with him my ideas about what might be coming and how this might be changed. But I think there's room to maneuver, and I don't think it will materially change the budget.
Okay, thank you. No questions. No more questions right now.
Questions for the moment? Councilmember Ambarish?
Um, looking at page 44, I just had a few line item in the weeds questions.
Page 44 of the,
Item A.
yeah, 44 at the top or at the bottom?
Oh, I'm sorry. On the top right corner.
Okay, all right. So
Thank you.
were we talking Trails Department or something different?
Services, Safety Services Department.
Gotcha, okay. Oops, going the wrong direction, sorry. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So I was curious about let's see, the chipper program. It looks like it increased by 35,000 for you. Do you happen to know why?
Yeah, the CHIPPR program is a program that the fire district runs with contributions from fire district and the two towns, Portola Valley and Woodside. And this year they hire that service out. And this year they were able to buy more of the service. So we could we could provide more chipper days throughout the communities. And so that's really just a reflection of us providing more chipper days.
Got it. We're getting more for our money.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
miscalculated 25,000 more. So thank you.
But yes, it's a enhanced service.
And then on that same page, I was wondering how come the defensible space matching program, it looks like it's been like the past 3 years, it's been between 600,000 and 700,000. And so I was wondering why we had proposed 500,000.
This year, this one is, I think when we started this program and we do media checks, I would say that we're probably going to go past budget. And I should also say, for everyone's benefit, that the control for the managers at the fund level. So everything in the general fund, we can move money around as we need. And that one, it looks like this year, the utilization is going to be a little lower because there's now because the fire district is now doing regular inspections, and that's meant that they're not, it used to be that they could just respond kind of next day to everyone who wanted to do a defensible space application. And now they've got a more programmatic, they have a more programmatic approach because they have to for their new rules. So it's looking like it might be trending down this year, and I just follow that trend. But in that 4.5 million, my experience, I 4.5 million for the department and for the entire budget, I think will, at mid-year, if it's looking like it's going large, we'll come and say, you may want to go long. But again, I don't think it's going to require us. I don't know that we've ever had to do a budget amendment to fully fund defensible space.
Got it. Thank you. And then my last question for this page, emergency response. I was just curious. I saw that 2022, I think it was 761,000. Then 23, 24, it was 550,000. And then it looks like the past year it's projected at 240.
Yep. The early years here those were the winters. So 22, 23, and even into 23, 24, we were still dealing with the two major storms that we dealt with in the winter of 23. What's kind of hanging out here now is still and this is an item projecting forward. This is something that Yaz and Jason will be bringing forward for discussion. But we're still paying for the temporary light at the top of Old Honda Road, which we put in place when we had to accommodate more traffic because 84 was closed. And that's something that I think will be coming before you for maybe removing that or trying to find some other maybe signage improvements or something to reduce that cost going forward.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then if you go to page 35, this time on the bottom, this is Public Works Department.
Yep.
And then contractual geologists, it looks like it's been $10,000 pretty consistently, and then it's jumping up to a recommendation of 180,000.
Yep.
Curious there.
Good eye, good eye. So that reflects the change. You may recall last meeting or the meeting before, we updated the fees and charges document, and we're changing our model for geology review from a deposit time and material charge to a flat fee. And so there's actually a corresponding increase in revenue for geology services as well. So what's in every previous year, this item was really just for if we needed kind of a quick opinion or something that wasn't project related. So that's why these numbers are so low. You know, we want you to go out and take a look at X. And the deposit funds that when people would submit a deposit and then get charged back, that's in a fund that's not included here in the general fund. It's in a deposit fund. So this reflects the fact that this will now be a fee and we'll pay for the service. So it's now more like the contractual plan check that's on the line below it. So it's just going to be different.
Got it. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gold.
Sort of a question / comment. It's more of a meta issue. We all serve as liaisons to other agencies that provide support to us, and in return, we fund those in some method. And as we heard from Dick just a moment ago, I think that the state and federal governments, their ongoing funding is certainly questionable, if available at all. And this came up, by the way, some of these they're related to health, they're related to safety. I'm on emergency services and the airport roundtable, but I know we have animal control in the libraries. And I mean, there's all sorts of things that provide services to us, and we pay for those. And in our last meeting at the Emergency Services Council, it became quite apparent that the amount of funding we're getting from the state and feds is drying up to almost nothing. And these are affecting us directly because they provide services to us, hazmat, bomb squad. Not that we have great needs for those things, but you never know. And the funding for those is done by various formulas. But the question that I'm asking you is there a potential liability on this budget in out years, perhaps, that these formulas may change pretty dramatically and the amount of money that these agencies get from other sources may be minimal, and our community may have to fund those more directly and at a much greater level. And I look upon that out there. I don't know how much of a liability they are, but they could double, triple, I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be a bigger number.
Yeah, I think, no, I think it's definitely an issue that to be mindful of going forward. I think there's a couple of things that I would say that, at least for us, may mitigate the impact of that. Number one, for example, you mentioned the emergency response. I was changing their name.
Emergency management.
Thank
It's
you.
the new name,
Thank
I
you.
think. They've changed it 3 times since I'm there.
Yeah, it's our annual contribution to that runs $25,000 to $30,000. So twice that. It's not
Still is-
nothing,
yeah.
but in the context of the budget, I think we can absorb it. I think I think the other mitigating factor, and probably is more important, I think in a lot of those instances, the other thing that you mentioned is the key, in that we have a seat, we and all the agencies that contribute have a seat on the board. And so it's not a matter of those agencies just, okay, now you owe us twice as much money. All the other cities that get the service are going to be at the table. And so I want to say this, I think I do that because a lot of them, the formula does reflect our size and draw on the programs. And so we're one of the,
We benefit.
we benefit from that a lot, and we're not one of the ones driving the budget. So yeah, I think it's a bigger issue for bigger cities who have a bigger, they're just contributing more money. And so, and again, being, talking to my colleagues and where they are, that those bigger cities, they are dealing with structural deficits. So having an organization that we're part of a JPA and we're governing with them, the pressure from those cities to keep those costs down, I think is going to be great as well. I don't know what that actually means in terms of service delivery. I mean, some of that would necessarily need to change, but
You've brought up the key issue, and that is we've benefited from it because we have 5,000 people. And so when you go up against, when we're diluted by Redwood City and San Carlos and San Mateo and bigger cities who hold the lion's share, but we have an enormous land area and require a lot, when it comes to fire and mitigation and animal control and those things, we actually may be a big demand, a much bigger demand than say San Carlos is in some of those things. And so I think that those cities that I named are mindful of that. And I think that these formulas may change. Now, I'm not so sure they're going to change so dramatically that, like you said, if it even doubles, it's not going to be material. But I think we have to really pay our fair share here. And I also think that the state and federal governments they're not going to be there, I don't think. And they have a big portion of that as of now. So I just think in the out years, it's something that certainly Jason's going to have to pay attention to, but I think we need to be mindful of it, is that these formulas are going to change, I suspect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Follow up one question.
Sure.
I'd like to go back to the walkway, roadway budget. And what I'm wondering is, when you said earlier that the north side is sort of still in the conceptual stage, you still got $2 million budgeted for that.
yeah,
Okay, and do we have anything even on paper budgeted for a south side all the way from school, all the way down to Woodside High School?
for from 280 south, from 280 south to the high school, that's the project that's being funded by the community project funding. That's supported by the money that Congresswoman Eshoo flagged for us.
I mean, the 800,000?
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
that's the east side of 280, correct.
Yep.
But I know there's been a lot of talk on the circulation committee about other pathways that
Yeah.
connect to that.
There's nothing in the budget.
Nothing in the budget for that.
No, between 280 and really 280 and Kenyatta, there's nothing in the budget for those
And
areas.
the north side of Woodside Road, that's in the budget at $2 million, is 2 years from now, is not really a real project.
Yeah, it's a marker. I mean, and that's why I have it as an unfunded. I think, again, I think if it remains in the CIP, I think it's best candidate, it's a candidate for grant funds. And I would encourage going forward that be the focus. And if there's not grant funds, then if you keep it, you move the project, you just keep moving it out over time.
Okay, thank you.
Because from my perspective, there's a way to we've built the infrastructure to connect to the school, which is what this would help with.
I just wanted to clarify something. I think we may be talking about two different projects here. So,
There are two different projects.
yeah, so the one that Kevin mentioned originally was the Norse on the library side.
Yep.
Right?
Right. And that's what's in the
Way
budget.
that sort of echoes the
That's what's in
one on the
budget
south.
of $2 million.
Yes.
Right.
Because
other-
we've got-
the other
it's got
project-
issues, you know, Andrea.
The other project has been discussed, Circulation Committee, extensively hook up to the work that's just been done on the east side, 280.
Yeah, so that's a
Um,
different thing. So we've been talking about the median beautification and as well as bike path, pedestrian paths on the, essentially on Woodside Road from the 280 to the high school, roughly in front of the Menlo Country Club down to
Right.
Churchill, down to the, which is completely separate than what you were talking about.
Yes.
I just want.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And thank you. No one said thank you for preparation of the budget at this time, given the transitional role, but thank you for taking care of that before moving on. Just dovetail on the same discussion, because that's my primary concern is this new line item in the CIP for the north side sidewalk for 2.2 million, unfunded and not unanimously approved. Can you remind us what we've spent on safe routes to school and sidewalks and crosswalks and so forth over the last 3 to 5 years to facilitate getting it back and forth to the school,
Yeah.
roughly?
Yeah, so going back to the first phase of the Woodside Road path that is there on the south side. So that first connection was in front, in fact, I think the first phase was just in front of the school. And including Glenn's Path, which I think serves as safe routes function. It certainly feels that way. The number I came up with was 2.8 million to 2.83 million. And we did receive grant funds to support those projects in the amount of just over 1 million.
And can you also remind us, you started to touch on this a little bit, but this is already considered by prior town teams or council or staff and was passed on and it's back. Can you just go into a little bit more why the decision
Yeah, I
was to
think,
pass
I
already
think
on
that
this?
the reason was, I mean, you remember when we started, we had nothing. It was, what you had out there was what we have on the north side, which was road, and then
Yeah.
there was no separation. And we did a safe routes school audit, and that, not surprisingly, kind of rose to the top that maybe having some grade separation, a path with a grade separation was the way to go. And I think there was an understanding at that time that trying to do both sides might have been prohibitively expensive. So then it was a matter of you look at the two sides and which ones offer you better options, or which one can you do cheaper, you know, which is, and the south side won out over doing both, or the north side. And I think the main reason was that for both, I want to say both grade and drainage, I think were the two big issues that were just going to be more complicated on the north side.
Mhm.
So it required more engineering solutions than what we did on the south side. Even taking into account the fact that we needed to do a crosswalk at Woody.
And at this point, it's still too premature to have even reached out to all those neighbors that are going to be impacted.
Oh,
on
yeah,
their
this is
right-of-ways and
way,
fence
this is,
lines
yeah,
and
this is
trees
way,
coming down and, yeah.
this is way at the beginning.
Seems very premature. Does, we really appreciate, of course, the work of the volunteers and the grassroots idea generation, but in this case, professionally, does staff have an opinion about whether this should be prioritized at this point on something like this and this starts to socialize it a little bit as
Yeah, well, I mean,
that might not be appropriate.
yeah, I mean, I'm on my way out, so
You can speak
I can speak.
if you want.
No, I think that there are other potential projects, even in the safe routes to school realm, which, especially at this price tag,
Mhm.
which would get us more bang for the
Okay,
buck.
fair enough.
Because I don't see that it's meeting it's not in an area that has no solution.
Right. Okay. Any other questions for Kevin?
Maybe-
Follow up.
Yes, follow up on that. So you sounded optimistic that grant funding might be available for this Woodside Road, North Side, Kenyatta to School project. Can you just say, or if you were data dumping on why you think grant funding would be available to Jason, like what would you say?
Well, I think that safe routes historically, and I think even going forward, safe routes still is an area that tends to get there tends to be greater opportunities for grant funds. And it's one of the things I think, when we've proven it in the past, there's some grants that the town goes for, which we have some built-in disadvantages. And I think a Safe Routes connection. Oh, I think we tend to do better competitively when you're dealing with Safe Routes versus some other kind. So it's just it's a project type, I think, where we're more competitive. About a third of the work that we've done on these other projects, we got grant funds to do. So yeah, I think that's,
And is it a condition to receiving grant funds that the town has budgeted for it? Maybe said another way, does it improve our chances of getting the grant funds that it's in the CIP?
yes, it does.
Okay. And I see that we have a separate project that's called Safe Routes to School Projects that we've only allocated $100,000 for.
Yep. Sorry. Is there a question or do you have, sorry, I did.
It sounded like you wanted to say more. I have a follow-up question, but if you want.
Oh, okay.
more.
Well, ask your follow-up question because maybe it's this.
So I hear you. I mean, I am a huge proponent of Safe Routes to School projects. I think it's really smart policy, given that more kids are biking, walking, and getting to school, not in cars. So I'm just wondering, but I also hear you that a specific project to build a path along the north side, sounds like there might be complexity, we haven't totally fleshed out yet. Did you give any consideration to just bundling those two projects together into one budget item so that we could further plan, investigate grant funding, and then sort of determine which Safe Routes to School projects we wanted to focus on?
No, and part of the reason, and this is where I was going to jump in, the item that you referred to where we have Safe Routes to School and we budget $20,000 a year, and that is, we sort of, and we do the same thing with equestrian. So these are really much smaller projects that we may be able to move on faster. We actually did in the last budget cycle, the crosswalks that we just finished at Kings Mountain and Romero, we did actually, we rolled this 20 into that. So we do sometimes do it. And so it's not that it wouldn't be, but given the dollars involved, the 20 here is really meant as sort of and I don't know if we've moved ahead with this, but I know the school has reached out with maybe the school reached out about applying for a grant for a relatively small project. That wasn't the bike. I thought it's something. Yeah. But the dollar amount felt like it might be something we would just use this, that it wouldn't be worth the paperwork to try to do a grant. We have this pocket of money that may be well used for. So you could, I mean, going forward, you can always look at this, and if you need an extra 20 or you want to bundle, this is a place to do it. But I don't think the Woodside Road, I don't think that concept is at a place where we want to take away from doing something else at this point.
It sounds like what you said is there's greater opportunity for grant funds for Safe Routes, right?
Yeah, relative to other projects or other funding that we might seek out. Yes.
So if we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves into a Woodside Road north side from Pinata Corners to School project, but we also wanted to maintain optionality to seek grant funding, would there be a way to sort of disambiguate that description so that we, maintained the ability to get grant funding related to Safe Routes to School projects?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question in the context of, because I wouldn't have something in here that allocates $2 million to something that didn't have at least a concept. So but
the concept of Safe Routes to per se is too vague.
well, yeah, no, well, maybe. I guess what I would say is I think that this 20,000 a year, I think this gives us, it's not very much money, but again, it's a budget plan. So if something emerged where we had, and again, I'll go back to the crosswalks, the crosswalk projects that we just finished. If something emerged that we might want to look at, another option for this money is, okay, let's use this to put ourselves in a position to compete for a grant or to build or to flesh out a project. So I think I think that there's money available, and I think that our budget clearly indicates that safe routes is something that we're kind of always on the lookout to do and to identify projects.
Would we be disadvantaged if we went out for grant funding for a safe routes to school project that was more expensive than $20,000, but we had only allocated $20,000 in the budget?
You have a thought on that? I'm sure you were.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. There are any projects, for example, large projects such as this $2 million. Safe Routes to School is not going to be able to, give us the monies we need. For example, for this cycle, the maximum you can get from Safe Routes to School is $150,000.
Sorry, just so I understand, what do you mean by the maximum we could get?
The applications. So because this is a limited pot, they put a cap on it in terms of what you can apply for.
Sorry, who's they?
This is the state where the funding comes from. But so when you go after a large project, when you go after funding for a large project, there's a variety of different grants that you can apply for. All of these are competitive grants. So, and the competitiveness is based on you having the town having a well-defined project and well-defined. So to answer your question, it's not really dependent on the amounts that we put in here. That doesn't really determine it. If we wanted to go after it, then it would have to be a project that's almost shovel-ready or is shovel-ready. So a design has to be done. Now, the design for something like this, let's say the north side of Woodside Road, will still be significantly will have a cost. So it's not at 20,000 or 30,000. It would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars just to do the design.
So you're saying, like recap, so the ability to get grant funding is more dependent on having a shovel-ready project.
Or close to a shovel-ready, at least a conceptual design that's pretty well defined, so that when you're competing with other cities for the grant, you're ranked higher.
In order to get to having a shovel-ready project, must it have been budgeted for in the CIP?
Not necessarily. I mean, you have to have you have to have the funding to do the design, and but that can be amended, as Kevin mentioned.
Yeah, the CIP, I mean, when you adopt it as part of the budget, it's a moment in time. So like anything else, if something emerged and we wanted to amend the CIP, that's an action we can take. So, as a project, and again, I go back to that 20,000 pot, if a project emerged from that we wanted to budget and apply for grants and together a funding plan, you could do that. You don't have to wait for the budget to do that. You can do that anytime.
Okay, I think with that, we'll open public comment. Ms. Hanson.
So I just wanted to make a clarification on, so I'm the assistant chair of the circulation committee, and the location for the north side of Woodside Road is not like the committee's priority was not the area that Kevin mentioned. Because it would be duplicated if we did it in the same area that it's on the south side of the street. There's a problem, a challenge moving kids that are west of this area. So there's a crosswalk by the tennis courts, but there's nothing between, like, to get the people on Miramontes and Albion and Manuela, all those people over there. So the first priority in the circulation committee's discussion of this area was actually a section that isn't served, that you can't get them because we have a crosswalk at Kings Mountain, we have a crosswalk at the tennis courts, and we have a crosswalk at Woody. So there's a whole, there's a whole section that needs safe routes to school. So the priority for a north side Woodside Road project wouldn't be this duplicated area. It would be the area that's not served. So I wanted to make that clarification. And I feel like that's really important because the proposal isn't to duplicate what we have. It's to have a section that you can get people from the north side to the south side, depending on where you live. I'm sorry, does that help?
So where, it's on, still on Woodside Road. You're talking about
Yes.
where the wide dirt area is on the north side across from the,
That's the
tennis
south
courts?
side.
Across from the tennis courts on the north side of Woodside Road. You're talking about that between Miramontes and Albion?
So yeah, but the existing pathway that's developed is on the south side.
Mhm.
On the north side, it's not developed. So people who live on the north side of Woodside Road either have to travel farther west to go to Kings Mountain Road to get to the developed side, or they have to go on an undeveloped area in those ruts. Am I making sense? To get to the crossing by the tennis court or to Woody. So the circulation committee's first recommendation was a segment that's farther west than the segment we discussed.
So if you were to rewrite the description of this CIP item, what would you say?
It would be the section of road on the north side of town between the crossing at the tennis court. I wouldn't write it this way. I'd like to spend some time and use better words. But between north side of the tennis courts and Kings Mountain Road is the section, please.
Okay, so what it says here in the CIP is just not what, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would actually suggest, I mean, because this is, it's just kind of a late, I mean, it was kind of a late add even to the CIP, this, right? You talked about this spring. I would suggest taking it out, ask the circulation to work on a refined description and bring it back.
I mean, we've talked about it quite a bit. I'm really hesitant to support taking out a safe routes to school item. So it's up to you, of course, but I would say don't take it out. Just redefine it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, one more question because I walk my dogs there. There's a very wide dirt area the whole way through. So you just look, what would the improvement actually be? It would just be what is the vision? Because there already is a big walkway that the whole way down. No, okay.
Yeah, there's the store side.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
horse,
I
there's a
know.
horse trail.
That's what he's
on
talking
the south
about.
side.
Seen the- Yes. The other citizen from Woodside,
Yes, the
who's a
citizen.
private citizen.
Chris Shaw, 140 Winding Way. One of the fun things about sitting in the audience is watching you guys check off all the things I wanted to talk about, which will make my public comments pretty tight. Starting with the town manager referencing the fact that the budgets over the last 7, 8, maybe more years have been spending down our net reserve on an annual basis because they were quite large. And, you know, that given today's economic climate, that gives me a lot of pause, particularly because at year 6, the town's net reserve falls below the 20 or 30% threshold. And that is something to pay attention to. And that dovetails nicely into what Councilmember Gold said, which is a lot of the county, state, and federal monies that were currently much more available are likely to be less available in outcoming years. And so what I'm arguing for is a much more conservative approach to our budget, at least for a cycle or two to see what happens, because, well, there's a punchline at the end of this thing. I would acknowledge Councilmember Brown, who, at least in my time while I was sitting with you all and approving budgets, was always the first one to scoff at budgeted items. and make comments about, you're going to be back here in 3 months asking for an amendment to contracts. And that happens on every single one. It doesn't matter what it is. We could be painting town hall and, oh, we need an extra $10,000 because it's Tuesday. And this goes to the CIP proposal for the north side of Woodside Road, which now makes a lot more sense of where we're talking about it. However, $2.2 million is going to turn into, Dick, what number do you want to throw on that? It could be 2.5, 2.8. And it'll come in waves, right? You'll get it budgeted. The design work will come back and Yaz will sit here and say, hey, we need an extra $20,000 for design work. And it goes sideways from there. At the end of the day, a project of that size, it seems awfully large for the space that I now understand it to be. But at the end of the day, that's going to blow a massive hole in the budget, huge. And you guys have the ability to move CIP projects around. Oh, I'm going to run long. I'm going to go Paul Gold on you. I apologize. You know, well, the other one is the crosswalks that were just finished. They were originally budgeted at $120,000. I went back and looked at, and I think they came in at like 290. So the bridge at Bear Creek and Mountain Home Road was originally slated to be done last year. It's now pushed, it's been pushed back every budget. It's now all the way out to 27, 28. That is an infrastructure project. So I'm in favor of refining what they're asking for the north side of Woodside Road and put a real number on it and slot it in. But at the end of the day, if we don't start being a little more conservative with our budgets, we're going to end up like our neighbors to the south, and nobody wants to be in that position.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. And we have Ishan in the Zoom room to bring in.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Hassan. I'm the chair of circulation. Thank you, Kim, for helping clarify that topic. I won't disagree with Chris in terms of fiscal conservation when necessary, but I'll leave that to you guys to decide. Just to clarify, Mayor, the section we're talking about is between Miramontes and Albion. Anybody who lives on the north side there is dirt there, but before you get to the school, there are drainage ditches that are not really walkable, especially if you're a stroller, disabled, etc. So the point is the people who are up there are landlocked unless they go all the way back to Kings Mountain currently to legally cross the road. So that's the section. You don't actually notice it unless you stop and look there. Or if you walk in the bike lane, which as we've come to find out is officially not legal. I know people do it, but people walk in the bike lane, which is the countermeasure to not walking in a drainage ditch. It is not a simple project. I know Yaz has told us that in circulation before. We fully acknowledge that. But at the same time, when the time is appropriate and the funds are readily secured and it makes sense, I think is the thing that would help Woodside. But I think there's still, a long way to go between our idea and an actual project. But that's just the section is that north side across from the tennis courts, there's about 4 or 5 properties worth of drainage ditches that are not easily traversable. And that's the section that we're talking about. And it affects all the people north, Miramontes, Albion, Miramontes, north, and that side of it. So just that clarification, hopefully helpful.
That is helpful. Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay. One more, of course. Sure.
So you all didn't talk about the sheriff at all. And it looks like from a budget perspective, we're going to pay more. And this past year, there was a hiring problem, a personnel problem. So I would say it felt like we weren't even getting the services we paid for. And then some of the new deputies aren't trained they're only trained for stop violations more than actually moving violations. So I don't know if you wanted any discussion on the sheriff budget because it seems high for what we got last year.
Yeah. So Kevin, we have a renewal coming. When will that be before council?
Well, I'm hoping this will be something that Jason is able to get done.
Kevin doesn't care.
Yeah. No, I'm hoping he can get it back to you, next meeting or June. We've communicated what our desire is to the sheriff. I'm waiting. Oh, I am no longer, but we are waiting for them to get back to us on that.
Right. And there was a debate last time about the level of services and the council, the majority of the council wanted to maintain those services. And so that was, you know, just, it is their number one budget item, really. So you get to a place of how sustainable is it or not. And, you know, I hear you, but last time it was before us where there was a majority, not a unanimous, but a majority view there. Did you want to say something? I can see your.
Yeah, sorry, I just had a question. Maybe it's a question for the mayor or Kevin. Last time we had a subcommittee of the council working on the sheriff contract negotiation. Is that happening again? Can you refresh my memory? Who's working on that?
Yeah, it's Councilmember Aberration, myself. So it can only be a two-person subcommittee, and given the employment contract background, that decision was made by the council, actually.
Okay, so you guys must be pretty deep into those negotiations if we're going to be bringing a renewal to the next council meeting.
I think we have both individually intercepted on this. Did you want to say anything about your involvement to date? Or not much?
Yeah, and we're not talking about huge, you know, like, there's only so much you can change, what I've learned. So yeah, it's arguing over the pieces that we can control, hopefully, and seeing if they'll budge, seeing what they do. So that's where we are.
We're wrestling with a little bit of an open-ended pricing issue there, though, which,
Well, that
and
was-
this is, it's agendized, it's part of the budget, so we can.
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit.
Well, I think the fundamental issue with the way they want to get paid for the service, so their principle is they want to get paid for the services they provide. I don't think anyone has an issue with that. The issue is the length of contract without an undefined cost from where I sit. And that's, I don't think we want to sign something that says,
So
well, length
of years.
of years without a defined cost over that period of time. That's really, I think that's the main point.
Which is why I have a contract.
Precisely.
Exactly.
Yes.
So there's work to be done, I guess, but that's going to be handed off, and
And
it's a couple.
that's one of our biggest budget items, and it's probably affected by state and federal funding as well. So it could, I mean, that's one of those that could like have repercussions on us.
Yeah, it could, but we're paying, we're paying for, the contract predominantly pays for personnel. So it pays for deputies that are assigned to the town and a percentage of the command staff that oversees them. And then there's a much smaller portion that relate to equipment, uniform, and the things that they have to do, you know, to do the job. But personnel is the cost that drives it, and we're paying for the cost of the personnel. So other funding might affect the organization as a whole, but in terms of paying for a deputy, that's going to cost us what it costs us. I don't think that'll change.
One thing I'm a little nervous about or just aware of is that, you know, with the turmoil with the sheriff and the sheriff's department, I understand there's, you know, a lot of complaints, which usually leads to or can lead to quite a few lawsuits, which can be very costly, defending them, even if they have merit, or if they don't, they're expensive. And if there is merit, then it's more expensive. So, so that's one thing I'm, you know, was hoping to work on other options, but our options are pretty limited. So, but yeah, but one thing to be aware of, that the costs might go up.
Okay. Any other public comments? Last call. Hearing and seeing none, we will close and we'll move on to deliberations. And this is just direction to staff. So maybe we'll just go down the line, but I think the issues we're talking about are, if you could just comment on where you are on Hillside Drive, the north side of Woodside sidewalk proposal, and I guess to some degree the pension, although we didn't have any Q&A on it, but that's an agendized sub point. That would be helpful in terms of figuring out where to go from here.
Shall we start?
Sure.
Okay.
We'll go down the line again.
First of all, I just want to throw one more thing out in our deliberations. I sit on the county transportation committee. And I can tell you right now, when we talk about funding for road projects and pathways and safe routes to school, number one criteria is called equity. What that means is if you have 3 or 4 projects that the county is looking at to fund, they only got enough funding for 2 or 3 of them. One of the first things they look at is this community a disadvantaged community? And Woodside doesn't fit that criteria. So we're up against that just to begin with. Whatever projects we come up with have to really be tight and probably not as expensive as some of the other projects that other communities that are bigger than us might be asking for. I just want to lay that down when we talk about it. A couple of things I want to talk about. One is for Hillside, I think that project is going to be a lot more expensive than what's on paper here. I don't know that as a fact, but just what happened on Glenn's, we can anticipate Hillside's going to be worse than that because it's a lot more complicated geologically. And I don't know how we're going to how many cars you can get in and out of there, much less how we're going to fix it. But anyway, I think the budget, it has to be really expected, as to Chris's point, it's going to be exploded dramatically versus what we originally estimate. North side, I think we're way away from being ready to say we've got a project. And I think we ought to, and I've said it on the circulation committee meetings on that. And I've heard the pros and cons. I'm not saying it's a project that shouldn't be done, but I think it's a project that the council needs to know a lot more about and what the alternatives might be to get kids to school safer than they are now before we budget a $2 million budget. And I think your point about does it help get a project? I don't, from what I've seen and the way the transport committee works, I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. As far as the pension allocation, are we talking about that yet? I don't see any point, given where we are right now, that we should be putting more money into a fund. We already are at basically the top of the line in our percentage of funding right now. And I'm as Chris said, I'm the conservative on financing. I'm worried about our ability to get funding in the future. And the demand's going up because we're talking about a lot of projects coming forward. And I want to be real conservative right now on how we put on paper our plans to do things. I'm also very conscious that we have a brand new town manager. And I want to make sure that he has plenty of time to do some input into the significant projects before we go on paper, that these are the projects that we really want to focus on.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. You want to go down the line, Councilmember Wall?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll start with the pension topic. So we didn't deliberate it much and didn't have many questions. I'm just looking at the staff report, which says, staff is comfortable with the conclusion that the town is among the most well-funded city in the county, if not the most well-funded with respect to pension liabilities. And I think there's a recommendation here that we not add funding to it, if I'm reading the staff report correctly or reading between the lines. Regardless, I don't think we need to add funds to that right now, although I do, from a policy standpoint, definitely support having a well-funded pension. We should be able to pay our pension liabilities, but it doesn't feel as though we need to add funds to that right now. In terms of Hillside Drive, I've been really involved with the Hillside Drive neighbors. I, have driven Hillside Drive, countless times. It's a safety issue. I mean, I don't think we really have much of a choice. The road is in a terrible state of disrepair, emergency vehicles. I can't imagine them, passing easily right now. If we further allow the road to deteriorate, it's only going to get worse. If we're concerned about costs, I would worry about the liability the town would face by not fixing the road. So, in addition to that, we heard from, many residents that wrote in to express their support of this important CIP project. If I would ask my fellow council members, if you haven't been to Hillside Drive, I would really encourage you to try to navigate it. It's really in terrible shape and you know, really needs to be remediated. So I'm really glad to see this project show up in the CIP. For the Woodside Road path, I'm really thankful that Kim was here tonight, and then we heard from Asan, because I think they were able to make an important clarification. So I would support keeping this in the CIP, but modifying it to say that it would be a path that would go from Miramontes to Albion. I think, you know, this project needs more work, but allocating, keeping it in the CIP, I don't see any downside to that. And then, you know, from a policy standpoint, I'm a huge supporter of safe routes to school. I think, you know, investing in paths to school is an investment in our community that's super important, not just for like the safety of the kids, but it makes our community better. It improves our home values. I think it's a win-win all around. So you know, I'd like to see this stay with those modifications in the CIP.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we'll jump all the way down. We'll give Mayor Pro Tem the penultimate
Sure.
moment.
So I'll start with Hillside Road. Having, you know, living in the Western Hills and having a road going through a road failure, I can tell you it's brutal. And I think, I don't know what it ultimately costs, but I would imagine a small fortune, you know, to redo that road when it failed, 84 specifically. So, you know, and I think things like this usually, in my experience, the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets, the more permanent damage. So I would say, I think we should prioritize it. It's probably going to cost a lot, it sounds like. And so maybe we, you know, focus on that, see where we can pull funds from other places, expect that it's going to cost more than whatever we budget for it. But I do think that should be number one priority: safety and upkeep, maintaining, you know, roads. Let's see, next one. The Woodside Road path on the north side, it does seem important, but at the same time, bang for the buck, it seems extremely expensive. I don't know if there's other options, putting in a new crosswalk or doing something else. I don't know, you know, what would be the best solution, but $2 million that we, you know, may get some funding for may end up eating a huge portion of the funding. It just seems, as of right now, from the information I have, does not seem like something I would want to pursue. Open to it. I do think that there's a problem and needs a solution. I don't know if $2 million plus towards that is appropriate. The last one, pension allocation. I think when we first started talking about this, it was kind of, you know, the market's down. Maybe this is a good opportunity to buy. I think right now we're all, you know, that's not the case at the moment. So, you know, it seems to have recovered. I have no idea where it's going to go in the next 6 months. I feel like it's, we're all wondering. So it doesn't seem like one of those, you know, let's buy right now, get the money in quick. We may end up, you know, putting it in at the top of the market or the bottom, who knows. So I would say probably hold off, maybe allocate some of that funding to the Hillside Road project.
Mayor Pro Tem Gold, I know you want to be called out first before you speak. So.
Yeah, always, yes, thank you. There should be trumpets or something. So specifically to comment on these three projects, Hillside Drive is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And I feel pretty strongly about it. And I think that it's one of the scariest roads you'll ever drive on. And I do not look forward to going there. I'm always think that I'm going to go off the side or off the edge there. And I can only imagine driving through in a, what are they, 10 or 12 foot wide fire truck. I mean, it's insane. And so that is one where I feel very strongly we need to fund it. I would point out that I agree with Councilmember Brown that $1 million is probably a starting figure. And it's for that reason that my comments on the next project are what they are. We've seen this with crosswalks. We've seen this with lots of projects where, you know, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. And I think that this is one project, Hillside Drive, that really has the potential of being a major, major issue for us. And we're going to self-fund it. And I think we need to make sure that that road is right for the safety and security of the folks that live there. So I do feel really strong about that. It is not a luxury. It is a necessity. On the other hand, the pathway on the north side of Woodside Road is a luxury and not a necessity. And there is actually a pathway, as we've said, on the south side. I think Hassan made a great point, and that is, it is the bang for the buck issue. And I just think it's not ripe yet. I mean, we heard a major change here tonight that, you know, it's going up to Kenyatta Corners and the circulation committee thinks it's going down toward the little store. Those are two pretty, it's not ready. That's enough of a conflict, just tells me, stop. Let's kick this back to the committee. Let's get some input on it before we go forward. So when you couple that with the potential for a huge overrun on Hillside Drive and the luxury of a pathway on the north side of Woodside Road for the school, I'm just not there yet. And so I'm all in on Hillside Drive, not in at all on the pathway, at least for now. The last thing I'll mention is the pension. And I probably differ with my colleagues on the council, but I will say that it's a soft difference. I'm for funding when the money's there, and it's not like the money's going to get squandered in the future. It just lessens our liability. I mean, it allows us to do, you know, it just means that some people who will be sitting here in the future, 10 or 20 years from now, will say, oh, thank you for putting that in, because it's, you know, now we're really pressed on other issues. Actually, Jason may have to deal with this. He may be one of those people who lives with this kind of a decision. But I think having the funding there does offer some degrees of freedom that we might not otherwise have. But I will say that my support of paying into the pension plan now, the pension trust, if you will, is a soft ask at this point. I could go with it either way. We are very well funded, and I'm happy about that. If we put the money there, it's not going to be squandered. This isn't like a, you know, some empty hole that we're shoving money into. It's just going to allow us to do things in the future that we wouldn't be able to. So just in summary, I'm a full yes on Hillside. I'm a full no on the north side pathway until we get more clarity on that. And on the pension, I'm a yes, but I could be convinced otherwise. I understand the positions on that.
That's great. And it's great to go last. So this will be fast. So fully supportive on Hillside. Dug in there over the last couple of months. And I mean, this has been going on for years and years and years, this conversation, as long as I've been here. So it is time to move forward. And not only for the specific issues, but for the broader evacuation issues and fire access reasons for the Glens neighborhood. On the $2.2 million north side of Woodside Road, I do appreciate the clarification. Kim's gone, but I do think, like everybody, like many or the majority, it is premature to have it appear on our CIP at this point, particularly for something that's come from a committee that was not unanimously supported, or it sounds like sort of fully considered, I would say. So not to say it's not something for the future, but it's not something I think should be here, because this starts to socialize it, and then you get the $75,000 feasibility study 5 months later, and 4 months later you get the design for $180,000. You know, and all of a sudden you're a little bit pregnant on stuff like that. So I don't want to see it there. On the pensions, I think the new information we got was that we are very well funded, and you know, relative to our peers. And we lost sort of this exciting moment when we were at peak uncertainty on trade and tariffs. So it's not really that exciting. Although to Councilmember Gold's point, Einstein once said that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. And what we're really doing is trying to get 7 or 8% returns versus at LAIF, where we're going to get 2 to 3 over a 10-year arc. And that actually, much like we've seen over a 10-year period, gives you between 60 and 90% more capital than you'd otherwise have. And so I do like the idea of consistently continuing to fund, and maybe not just saying just because our neighbors aren't very well funded that, you know, we'll pat ourselves on the back, even though we have a $5.3 million pension liability that we still have to get to over time. So I do like the idea of, if there's one priority, it should be this. This is one of the things people don't think about. So the idea of $1 million right now doesn't strike me as very interesting. Earlier today, I thought, well, what if we did 250 or 500 or some smaller amount that we just every year kept going into to try to get that compounded effect over a 10 or 20-year arc. But there is not wide enough support, I think, really to even push for a compromise solution. So I'm okay for now from my viewpoint. But I appreciate everybody looking at it. And I would say the other big thematic that we heard 6 times out of 5 of us was the fact that it's going to get harder and harder to get outside funding, and that the velocity of money in government is starting to slow tremendously. And you know, you can even see it at the state university system facing 8% broad cuts and layoffs and all sorts of stuff. And so we're going to be hit by a lot of people looking for money, and we just have to be very conservative with our viewpoints, I think, and what we're willing to allocate and where we're willing to allocate it, particularly because we give so much of our 93% of our tax dollars leave us. So we are operating on a shoestring budget, and so we have to be very careful. So I love the idea of fiscal conservatism, and I love the idea of watching our capital very, very closely. Is that enough for you, or for the future?
Yeah, Jason, you good?
Yeah, I think it was clear. Thank you.
Any further deliberation before we move on? Work plan.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'm really, there's no introduction. I mean, not much. It kind of, this is it. And I thought it was a good opportunity with a new town manager taking over to just kind of memorialize this and give council any chance if they wanted to comment on any of these things. I did get a question about social media policy, which is something that was being worked on by town attorney and some other staff. And I think we were thinking of it as kind of a policy that we were looking at in conjunction with the electronic communication policy. So maybe if redrafted, we would just include that. We would include that in the title. Maybe it's the same, but in terms of where it fits in this, it's part of that as well. So, I mean, any questions or comments we'll take, but.
Mr. Kevin. We appreciate you putting it together. We will open it up to any comments on the work plan from the public. Seeing none, we will shut down public comment. Any further discussion or direction that anyone would like to provide? Okay. Thank you for putting together this transition memorandum. It's we appreciate trying to make it as smooth as possible, this change of guard moment. So thank you. Item C, presentation and request for funding by the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District shoreline.
Yes, I'm going to just do 2 things. I'm going to invite and introduce the CEO of One Shoreline, Led Matterman. He wanted to provide an update and talk to the council about the work that One Shoreline does. I will note, even though we've gone past the budget discussion, that the budget does not include any funding for One Shoreline. So should you want to direct that, you can certainly do that as part of this item, and it would just be reflected in the budget that you consider for adoption.
Okay.
All you, Len.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Share screen.
Okay. Good to see you all. This is my first time at this council, and it's good to see you. I've been to most other councils over the last 5 years, almost all of them. And I just came from the Menlo Park City Council about half an hour ago to talk about One Shoreline, what we're working on. And Woodside provided funding for our first round of funding, which was in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Thank you for that. So my name is Len Matterman, as Kevin mentioned, and I run the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District. Talk about what that is and what we're working on. We go by One Shoreline for obvious reasons, so that people don't have to say our long name over and over. Long-standing flood control district throughout the county, created in 1959, and it covered about 10% of San Mateo County. And included 3 active flood zones, as they're called. Those are the areas in kind of pink, orange, and green. The area in yellow is an inactive flood zone. The one that is related to Woodside is in green, San Francisco Creek flood zone. And so these flood zones collect property taxes and do projects. Lots of studies over the years, especially the last 10 years, by county government, as well as Caltrans and MTC, ABAG, Stanford, Berkeley. They all pointed to the vulnerabilities in San Mateo County as being very substantial, especially in the area of sea level rise, but not just in that area. And because of that transformative challenge, the cities and the county in 2017, 2018, 2019 made a commitment, and there was state legislation that was signed by the governor in 2019 to create One Shoreline to work on all things related to the water impacts of climate change. And that includes too much water and too little water, drought, water supply, as well as coastal erosion and flooding and sea level rise, groundwater rise. We take a holistic view of these threats, meaning different from the former flood control district. We're not just looking at a historic FEMA 10-year event or 50-year event or 100-year event. We're looking at future conditions. We take a holistic view of the geography. We work countywide, from Pacific Coast side to San Francisco Bay and all the areas in between, and a holistic view of the objectives, meaning housing issues. If the housing is not prepared for climate change, that's a climate change issue, or transportation, or environmental areas, or public infrastructure, whatnot. Here's our priorities for coming fiscal year, matches our priorities previously. We plan land use for climate-driven future conditions, and in conjunction with projects that provide resilience, advance efforts that do long-term resilience, and advance the resilience not just for developed areas and recreational areas and natural areas, but also economic resilience for property owners. We're getting very active with a group of local governments nationally on the problems of accessibility and affordability of insurance, especially in states that are impacted by climate change. Reducing the impacts of today's storms, not just future conditions, and alerting people to those the threats that those storms pose in real time, and then establish ongoing local funding streams to continue to leverage project money. You guys spent a lot of time today talking about, obviously, the budget, but also projects. To attract outside funding, you need to put up local funding in most cases. And that's needed certainly in the area of climate. Okay, climate vulnerabilities in Woodside. You can imagine these pictures here. This is Woodside Road between Fox Hill and Portola in 2023. And of course, that's the CZU fire coming down from Page Mill Road, also since we were established. If you look at Woodside's vulnerabilities according to First Street is probably the most authoritative group nationally that's looking at various climate threats, including threats related to air and heat, and of course fire and water. you see the vulnerabilities that are within the town of Woodside. People ask me a lot, if I don't live or work along the water, should I care about sea level rise? Well, what I'd like to say is if you flush a toilet, or you drink water, or you turn a light switch, or you use natural gas, or you drive in Highway 101, or drive on El Camino, or drive on Highway 1, you care about sea level rise. Here's an image that shows all of the major infrastructure in our county on the bay side. Of course, this is mirrored on the coast side, but on the bay side, if you look at where our water comes from, it comes inside, it enters the peninsula in Menlo Park, and in a facility that's not protected for sea level rise. If you think about our water treatment plants that serve this part of the county are at the end of Redwood Shores, Silicon Valley Clean Water, and West Bay Sanitary District is doing a project to upgrade their facility. Those are ill prepared. In fact, they get flooded today. Natural gas and electricity is in the bay. And as you know, if you've driven on El Camino during any of our big storms, the businesses that have sandbags there and the parking lots that are flooded, that area is not draining properly. And that's associated both with storm surge and with large events. And I'll give you a couple statistics about sea level rise to demonstrate that it's not a far off condition. In the last 125 years, the NOAA gauge in San Francisco, which gauges bay water elevation, has risen 9.8 inches in 125 years. The Redwood City gauge in the last 50 years, since 1975, so in our lifetimes, has risen 5.3 inches. So this is not something that is a 2075 problem. This is something that affects us today, and we can talk about that. In terms of land use planning, lots of examples of private developments. The images here on the left show 3 of them, some of which were built in the last year, including the one on the bottom, which is in the town where I live, which is San Carlos. That's a private development built across from a pump station, and this is on a sunny day during a high tide today, of course. And the building has its mechanical equipment and parking underground, and you wonder kind of the resilience of this building. So our board adopted planning policy guidance in 2023 to address some of these concerns around private development. In several cities have adopted it. This is an example, it's hard to read, but it's an example of a development agreement in Burlingame where the developer is required to build resilience for their property and the surrounding community, and also provide an easement to Burlingame and One Shoreline to build that protection up later if that's needed. We now are turning our attention to public infrastructure. And the basic question is that we're trying to get policymakers to ask during the process of approving projects, whether it's private development or public infrastructure, is what's being proposed going to be resilient against climate change during the lifetime of that project? So is a stormwater system being designed to historic 10-year events, or is it being designed to future 50-year events? That kind of a question. So we'll be looking at utilities, stormwater systems, wastewater systems, water recycling systems, parks, marinas, and roads. And we have consultant teams that are already engaged in this effort and advisory committees of local jurisdiction staff to help us with this effort. And we plan on coming out with the first kind of tranche of infrastructure guidance in early 2026, and then the next one the following year. The first one will focus on stormwater systems and roads and wastewater systems. Okay. In terms of projects, there's lots going on around the county. I'll turn your attention to just one of the things in this slide, and that's the one in the bottom right, which is in kind of a red dashed line surrounded by blue, and that's the service area of Silicon Valley Clean Water. There's a planning exercise that One Shoreline is leading for Redwood Shores, and connecting that into San Carlos, Belmont, and Menlo Park and East Palo Alto. That addresses shoreline resilience. There's also a Redwood Shores project that Redwood City is doing to further elevate its levee to maintain, to keep the area out of the FEMA flood zone. But all kinds of projects all over the place in this county to deal with long-term resilience. In terms of today's storms, we're also doing a lot, and that really gets into two buckets. One is reducing the impact of the storms. There are a lot of creeks in our county where debris has been built up over years, in some cases decades, and a lot of that buildup is associated with roadways. So we've created a 5-year program working with regulatory agencies to remove debris from flood-prone creeks and working with Caltrans. A lot of the problem areas, so to speak, are El Camino or Highway 101, where Caltrans has not maintained the culverts underneath those roadways. So, but it's not just at roadways, and so that's one area, is to just remove debris from creeks so that they can flow properly. The second one is provide early warning to people. The image at the left of the screen is from our gauge at Atherton Channel, providing early warning both for emergency responders and for the public at large, sometimes through SMC alert if there's flooding that's certain to be downstream. Here's a portion of Atherton Creek where we're doing, where we're getting permits so that the city of Menlo Park can go in and clear the channel downstream of the town of Woodside in this channel. Our early warning system, this is what one of the, the image in the upper right is all the gauges. There are 32 gauges around the county. We're actually adding more gauges in the next year, but this is a dashboard for Atherton Channel, what it looks like, where it tells people kind of what's going on inside the channel. And it also, as I mentioned, can send out alerts. We are expanding this program in Atherton Channel at Alameda. That's where the picture is right there, to provide advance warning for all areas downstream of between Alameda essentially and the Caltrain tracks in the town of Atherton. In terms of funding, so again, all cities contributed to One Shoreline back in 2020, 2021, 2022. That was matched by the county. That 3 years of funding through efficiencies and external funding, we've been able to extend that from 3 years to 9 years. So we're funded through December 2028 right now. We've also brought in about $30 million, a little bit over $30 million in additional funding that's outside of the property tax revenue from the historic flood zones that I mentioned. And as was mentioned earlier, a request, and is in the agenda topic, actually title for today, request was for additional funding for all the cities, from all the cities. A letter went out to Kevin, and all of you were CC'd on it a few months back. And so that's still an active request. So with that, I will say thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation. What is the level of funding that we provided initially that for that 3-year period?
The first 3-year tranche, so to speak, it was $15,000 per year for 3 years. Yep. There were, can I just say, there were 3 categories of cities. It was based on population. There were the 4 largest cities provided the most funding, and then the 9 middle tier cities, so to speak, in terms of population, and then the 7 7 cities in the tier that had the least population, including the town of Woodside.
When One Shoreline came to us 3 years ago and asked for funding, you described yourself, the whole project was a sea level rise avoidance project.
Yep.
And how to deal with it. And at that time, I believe you were talking about 5 to 8 inches height increase in the ocean level. Now it's up to 9 something. How much difference has there been like the last 3 years? Because I understand most of that sea level rise comes from the ice melting in the Arctic. Is that correct?
So the previous focus was on sea level rise, and really 2 things changed that broadened the focus. One was the cycle of drought and deluge that we saw in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, where we had really drought periods that were punctuated by major atmospheric rivers, and that brought most of the rainfall each year. And when we realized we had to address that climate-fueled concern. And the question of how much sea level rise, I can't really speak to what was discussed in that way before One Shoreline was created. Our projects our projects that we're designing now that deal with sea level rise assume a very substantial amount of sea level rise, several feet. What I was talking about, the sea level rise earlier in my comments, were related to the amount of sea level rise that we've already seen since 1900, essentially, or in the case of the Redwood City number, since 1975. So my point there is, this is not a new issue. It's been going on. It's anticipated to accelerate. You mentioned the melting of ice in Antarctica, I think you said.
The Arctic.
Sorry?
The Arctic, it was your.
Yeah, the Arctic, yeah.
The Arctic was gonna
Yeah.
melt and
And
we had 5 to 8 feet.
I think
increase level.
that's certainly one of the issues. Another issue is just when the ocean is warmer, which it has been quite a bit. We've seen some of that, like super warm, hot areas, especially in the Gulf of Mexico and around in the South Atlantic seaboard. The water expands when it's heated, and that's another cause of the sea level rise. But I'm not an oceanographer or ocean scientist, and I can't really dive too deeply into that. I just know it's happening, and we're seeing evidence of that in San Mateo County, it's not just an issue for Miami or, kind of some of the places that we see on the news that talk about that. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just curious, you'd mentioned debris removal from creeks and also some monitoring systems that are implemented to monitor I assume the level of the creek. That would, I can imagine that would be very useful in these more intense storms. Are any creeks or are any creeks on the road, any creeks in roadside on the roadmap to have that kind of debris removal or monitoring efforts?
In the town of Woodside?
Yeah.
So they're not. I mean, Kevin and I have talked previously about the issues in Woodside associated with the major storms, and I'm certainly happy to have One Shoreline, talk with you all and Kevin's successor and staff here about what might be appropriate in our next round. One of the issues to address this issue, one of the challenges of addressing this issue in a, let's say, thoughtful, strategic way is the permitting process. What the regulatory agencies don't want cities to do, or towns, is to go in there during a disaster, right after a disaster, and do something that might harm the environment. Right? That's their perspective. We do that because we have to do that in some cases, but it's cheaper and more effective if you plan for that, not surprisingly. And so we develop these 5-year programs, and every county has them. It's not just something we invented. And so what we would do is we would work with the town to figure out, okay, which areas need this, that based on known flooding experiences, what are the constraints of doing this work. Sometimes they're land rights constraints, sometimes they're environmental constraints, sometimes their access is very difficult. There are various things that can be constraints. And we would, in our next round of permitting, we would work with the town to include that in our program as we expand it. This is our first round. And in our first round, we're focusing on 4 creeks for this long 5-year permit. And that is San Bruno Creek, Belmont Creek, Cordilleras Creek, and Atherton Channel. And so I'm happy to, if the town is interested, happy to have that conversation.
Maybe just a quick follow-up. I'm sorry, geez, quick follow-up on that. In this up until now, have there been any direct projects in the town of Woodside based on any of the funding that we provided last go around? None.
There have not.
Okay. Second question, just because it's always been confusing to me, is the funding piece of this. the scaling has always been strange to me, that small towns pay 25,000, large towns pay 55 or whatever it is. Yeah, we're 5,000 people, Redwood City's 80,000 people, 16 times their size, but they only get a 2x allocation. Like, you speak to a little bit to why the scaling is so, spectrum seems off. Why is that? What was the philosophy?
Yeah, I think so. So the original tranche, let's call it, I was not there for. So what I can say based on what I know from 2019 when this was developed was kind of getting to the point that simpler is better, rather than a scale that is much more, let's say, fine-tuned for variations in need or population, is that to create 3 tiers, and the thought was that 25,000 or 55,000 in the context of the need was not, enormous. So that's all I can say. I agree with you that certain cities have greater needs, and certain cities have much greater populations than Woodside. There's no question. The best way to tailor that, what formula to use, I don't know. This was a way to easily communicate it at the time, and that's where we're at.
But it hasn't evolved, so it's just interesting. On population, the ask would be 3,400. Another question for you.
Sure.
It's just the funding source idea of going to the underlying cities. Your name is a San Mateo County entity. It's really a county issue. The county has a $4 or $5 billion budget, 300 times the size of ours. Why is the county not making this a priority to fund? Why doesn't it come that way? Why do you go and beg little towns for $25,000? I mean, it seems inefficient, I guess.
So I'm not begging.
I know. I didn't mean.
It's your decision. I'm just
Mr.
saying
Matterman.
what the reality is. The reality is we all have a great vulnerability, not just the county. The county and incorporated areas are vulnerable. Jurisdictionally, the cities are vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. And at some point, we're all in this together. So I'm not begging. The county has provided considerable Measure K funding for projects, and that's helped us with operations. And so the county, one of the last bullet on this slide, the county in November 2024 recommitted its $750,000 a year for operations for the next 3 years. So I think, should the county be more generous? Perhaps. Has it been generous? Relatively speaking, I think so. But part of Kevin and I talked about tonight, and the budget, and that this is coincident with your budget discussion, which is a difficult budget discussion, of course. And for me, the issue is the imprimatur of having as many cities as possible say, this is important. It's not about the number. It's about Woodside, Redwood City, San Mateo, Burlingame, everybody saying, we know that this is a challenge for us collectively, and we want to work together to solve that challenge as much as possible.
Thank you. Just maybe one other question. I hope I was reading the right annual report. 40 million is what you put into the Colma Creek? That's a big number. If I might have been reading the wrong. How much money did you put into the Colma Creek project? Do you know?
So I'm not sure which number you're referencing. In our
That's
Colma
why
Creek,
I'm curious if I was reading the right report after seeing your financials.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you might have seen what our bank account, for lack of a better term, is for Colma Creek, and
Yeah.
that's all from property taxes. Yeah, it's at the end of this fiscal year, it'll be about $45 million.
Yeah. Okay.
We also have liabilities in addition to assuming that bank account from San Mateo County when we were created. We also assumed a bond, which has a $12.5 million payout. If we pay this year, it grows considerably if we don't. We're considering paying it off. But that money has to be spent within the watershed because it's from property taxes within the watershed. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see. Got it.
Yeah. So that's not our slush fund. It's for
Yeah.
projects.
It was a
Cold Spring.
stunning number, and I was like, wow, Coleman's paying the same we are. They should be.
Oh, no,
But I
no.
get it. Okay. Okay.
And
And,
if I could clarify, that's separate from
Yeah,
all this
separate.
operational discussion.
Yep.
Yeah.
okay. Any other questions for? Mr. Matterman?
Yeah, one follow-up. Just curious, where are you in your presentations to the cities and towns of San Mateo County? Who has been supportive of this and allocated funding, and has there been any town or city that has declined?
So this is a busy time in terms of presentations. This is my 11th one in the last 2 months, I think is right. And next week, East Palo Alto, the week after that, Half Moon Bay. So I'm really kind of making the rounds. And part of it is it's not just about this funding request. It's about talking with the city councils about the work that we're doing or not doing with them and what that could look like. In terms of the request, some cities have said it's in the budget. Some cities have said they're talking about it. No city has said they're not considering it. Honestly, so I don't know how many of the 20 cities will be contributing again this round versus last round. You know, honestly, I'm not here to raise money. That's not why I came tonight. And I think Kevin will attest to that based on our conversations. I hope so. I'm here because I've never been to Woodside Town Council, and it's about time that I come and talk to you all about these issues. That's basically why I'm here. So, any other questions?
And thank you for the very interesting and great presentation. Maybe just a procedural question to Kevin. Are we just, you're not looking for a vote here, right? Are you looking for direction or are you looking for a vote?
Well, I think direction, we're looking for direction. It can take the form of a vote. As I said in introducing Mr. Matterman, that it's not in the budget to review tonight, but you need to adopt that. And so you have the option. I mean, I think from a staff perspective, do you want us to include money or do you not would be a good thing to know. So does that answer the question?
What I heard is that you are looking for direction from council on whether or not to include funding for this in the budget that we will approve at a future council meeting.
And I spoke clearly, yes.
Any other questions?
No questions, but I'm supportive. Just to-
Well, we're not quite.
I know, I
open
understand.
Public comment. Any members of the public that would like to speak on this issue? Oh, wow.
Sure.
Let's sit here.
Do you have anybody in the Zoom room? You want to? Gotta get the whole place to myself. I was on council back in 2019 when we had this very discussion, and let's postulate and accept the fact that all the slides that we've seen tonight and the discussions around sea level changes and the impacts of too much water, not enough water are 100% valid. We've witnessed that on Woodside Road. Where I have a problem with this thing is, and I appreciate the mayor for teasing this out in the conversation, is this funding vehicle. It says in the letter that we got from One Shoreline, and I'm going to point out that this is a San Mateo County district, which implies an agency that is using tax dollars that come from Woodside residents and also residents in San Mateo County property taxes. So also in this letter is that their $30 million is restricted for capital improvement. So what we're being asked for, or what you're being asked to approve, is not a begging issue, but it's a donation, and they want a donation to cover their office expenses and their overhead. Not all of it, but that's the implication here. If 93% of the property taxes are leaving Woodside, we're already funding this. And here is my absolute fundamental beef with local government, county government, state, and federal. If this is that important, and it's a county agency funding it with our tax dollars, fund the whole thing. Coming to us and saying, well, it's like being on a nonprofit board and we want everybody that sits on the board to make a donation. I resent it. Find the dollars, reprioritize. You guys are going to have to reprioritize your capital improvement projects. The county should take some responsibility and reprioritize their programs and allocate the dollars to one shoreline. I'm perfectly happy with that. I pay my taxes. This is a novel and peculiar way of going about funding an agency. What I found a little bit frustrating, and now I will use a stronger adjective of almost insulting, is 6 years ago they said, we need you to give us this money so that we can find permanent funding for our agency. And we had a big, long debate about it. We had 2 meetings, you know the whole story. We ended up giving them 15 a year instead of 25. And here we are 5 years later saying, hey, give us this money and we'll go out and find permanent funding. With all respect, I support the efforts of One Shoreline. This is a county agency. They should fund it, as opposed to asking for a donation and then saying, well, we want 100% participation, and if you don't, well, shame on you guys. That's not fair. I was pretty close to the time.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Any other comments? See none in the Zoom room? Seeing none here, we will close public comment and move on to, I guess we're going to end up with a motion one way or the other here. So a little deliberation would be in order.
Have a motion to discuss it at a future meeting.
Well, that'd be the punt option. Yep. Or we could have a failed motion to fund or a failed motion to, man, I get it. Where's everybody on?
Want me to open?
Sure. I mean, I've been looking at you all night. Start to do the same thing.
I guess I feel we're here looking at a worst case of mission creep that I've seen in a long time. This was sold to us in 2019 as basically fighting sea level rise and some of the flooding that comes from sea level rise. Now what we're seeing is we're going to fight flooding, and oh yeah, that some of it which may come from sea level rise. It's 2 very, very different oppositions. I was afraid at the very beginning that this was going to be mission creep to get out a lot more money. And my attitude right now is I'm really with Chris, Mr. Shaw, that this may not be something that should be funded by Woodside. It should be funded by the county or maybe other agencies that are going to be more directly impacted by this than we are. I mean, flooding is not a big issue. Yes, has been an issue in certain creeks, but it is not a huge problem for us, nor is sea level rise. And it's been sold to us, I think, with a proposition that has now changed. I think we have a right to relook at it and say, does this make sense for us today? To me, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, thank you. We'll just go down the line. Councilmember Wall.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I found it really informative. I think I'm one of 3 council members who were not on the council when this issue came before it back in, I think it was 2019. Let's see, I think it's important for me to start out kind of by sharing my own personal views here, which is that I very much believe that climate change is real. I do believe that that's causing sea level rise and storm intensity, which the impact of which we have felt in a very real way here in Woodside. I was vice mayor under former council member Shaw back in 2022 when we experienced the atmospheric river storms, which were quite scary and had, actually I experienced property damage at my home. I know of a number of residents whose homes were severely damaged because of creeks that were blocked and caused flooding. And so I think the impact of these more intense storms and what we generally refer to as climate change and sea level rise is very, very real, not just in Woodside, but also in the county. So we're very vulnerable to this. And so I'm very much in support of allocating what I believe is a pretty modest level of funding to support this agency. Woodside is in a very strong financial position, and I liked what you said. It's not about the dollar amount, which is minimal. It's really about it's a policy statement. It's showing that we're supportive of this county initiative, which the county has allocated funds to. In terms of mission creep, like that doesn't bother me, right? Like missions, get defined, and over time, when the problem changes, your mission changes. And so the fact that the mission here has expanded, I don't see that as mission creep. I just see it as strong stewardship of the agency to address the evolving problem. In terms of this being a quote novel and peculiar way of funding an agency, I'm not opposed to novel and peculiar. I think it's actually quite scrappy and intuitive, and I think it's a nice way of bringing the cities and towns along and having them have some skin in the game. In this case, it's pretty modest. So, I think, yeah, I'm very much in support of this, and I would direct the staff to include the amount requested in the budget.
Guess we'll jump all the way over there. Council member.
I appreciate what former council member Shaw said. I have to agree that it is, and Councilmember Brown, I agree it should be a county issue. It seems like a county issue because I think ultimately the funding is going to go to the cities and towns that need it and where the projects are. And so, but instead we're kind of talking about pooling it, on like a town level, whereas some of the money might go to us, some of it, projects might not. And, but at the same time, it sounds like there is significant funding already, and there's a lot more funding that's going into it. And so essentially what we're looking at is like a pay to play. If we put in $25,000 a year, we might get out of it a huge project that we otherwise would not get and would be significant. If we have a creek issue and one of our creeks gets, has an issue and we can get a project in there. So it's almost feels to me like playing the lottery, but the pot is big and we're just putting in a small amount. So from that perspective, and it feels like you're only getting the opportunity to get this funding and these kind of projects if we put in some money. So looking at it like that, I think I probably would be supportive in a roundabout way, but I could go either way, to be honest.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
I wanted to thank former two-time mayor Shaw for enlightening us about some of the legislative history on this. I was unaware of some of those things, which is important to know. And I think you made some compelling points, as you usually do, much to my dismay sometimes. But I think that you made a great point. And I think that if the original investment was so that it could be a going Jenny, if you will, and be self-sustaining at that point, that's good enough for me. I recognize that, when promises and representations are made, it's especially given our financial situation and the precarious nature of what we're looking at, and having just gone through the budget and decided not to fund pensions and things like that. The pension trust fund, which is somewhat of a luxury at this point. I'm not inclined to go along with it at this time.
Okay, thank you. It's important work. I'm in agreement with that. I was one of those folks that was here, and I remember what the promise was, and here we go again. We have a very limited budget. We participated in the ramp up like we said we were going to do, and we just went through this budgeting process where we basically said, oh, we're not going to do that infrastructure project because we can't afford it. We're not going to put money into the pension because we can't afford it. Every dollar counts and fiscal responsibility counts. For me, it would go a long way if there was a Woodside project. I think that's what I need to see, to allocate Woodside taxpayer dollars to something, but we just went through the last how many years? It went everywhere else, but it didn't come here. So I think it was a very interesting comment about sort of a lottery system, but I want to see it first. So if there's something project that can be utilized here in Woodside, that would have a big impact on my vote. But right now, I don't like the way this is funded. I don't like that it's back, and I'm not supportive. However, I really appreciate your presentation, and I do think it's important work, and I agree on the climate change comment and all sorts of things. It's important work. It's just, it seems a little, it's just, yeah, it seems like it's turned into something different, perhaps. So.
Is sufficient. No, I tallied, I'm gonna call it 3.5 no's. So that tells us what we need to know.
But we do thank you for being here, and it is very informative, so thank you. Beyond that, we just have volunteer committee updates.
Mayor Domkowski. In the town council's packet is 2024 accomplishments and 2025 plans from the Livestock and Equine Heritage Committee. If you have any questions or comments for me to take back to the committee, I'm happy to do that. And then just a few quick updates. Recreation Committee, the May Day Fun Run and Walk was a success with over 215 registrations. And there are 2 workshops coming up, myofascial and yin yoga workshop on Saturday, May 24th, and a sound immersion workshop on Friday, May 30th. And coming up, the Co-ed Adult Summer Softball League. We are going to be opening registration soon, and that starts in June 22nd, actually. Sunday is opening day. And the town, in conjunction with the Arts and Culture and Environment and Open Space Committees, will be sponsoring a Spirit of Woodside photography contest. Contest winners will be included in a special art exhibit and reception at the November 1st Friday event. And participants must currently live in Woodside and be younger than 19 years of age as of May 19th. So we'll be opening, I think the subcommittees are meeting, and I think that the entry period will start next week. And it closes in October, so it gives people who are participating time for the summer to take some photos of Woodside and submit them. And there's different categories and different age groups. And then the Woodside History Committee is working on a fire exhibit to be on display at the museum. So keep an eye out for the grand opening of that exhibit.
That was a very uplifting, we needed that right now. Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome.
We went from a dark place to a very optimistic place. Council communications, and we're going to go in reverse. I'm going to give you the floor, my friend. Okay.
I just have a brief point of personal privilege. I have a comment for my good friend Kevin Bryant. Since this is, reality is setting in, I assume, at this moment in time. But we were in this room on Friday afternoon, and it was a really wonderful celebration, I think, of the accomplishments that Kevin made. And I think Mayor said it perfectly. It'd be difficult to improve upon his words, and I'm not even going to try. But it's interesting that when you hear about somebody and you hear the same comments over and over again, it begins to, it's sort of like your own perceptions are accurate. And it's sort of nice to hear. But the words we heard over and over again were calm, measured, reasonable. And that actually is, I think, the way I've always viewed Kevin and his tenure here. But what people don't see is when Kevin's phone rings in the middle of the night, probably on a holiday weekend, and a highway is collapsed or all hell breaks loose. And I know that while I'm sleeping, he's out in the middle of a roadway on the phone calling people up. I'm sure Jason knows about these issues quite well from his experience in Wairika. But we don't see that. And you're standing out there in the rain with a phone and getting things done and directing folks around. And while we sleep, and then we can come here in the morning, and even though it's maybe an emergency situation, it's certainly different than it is in the middle of the night. The Kevin we know and the Kevin we see is quietly and efficiently getting things done. And he does so without fanfare or the need to feed some inflated ego. And believe me, I know something about an inflated ego, so I say this with a great deal of expertise. Kevin, you work perfectly with the staff. You work with the town attorney. You work with the citizens of the town, our volunteer committees, and even the town council. And just the town council alone is quite an accomplishment. But you've left our town in incredible shape financially, debt-free, pension-funded, well-staffed, and you even have a great successor that's in place. And that successor is very well positioned to continue on your success. And your success was built on Susan George, who was great to see her here. And hopefully that baton passing is going to be equally as successful. So I just wanted to thank you for all you've done for the town, and I want to personally wish you and your family well in your new adventure. Thank you.
Normally end right there, but of course, still open for any additional council comment. Yes.
Just to like to congratulate Kevin on surviving his last Paul Gold speech.
Oh, this is, so yes.
And then there is one more event coming up, 22nd of this month, 3 to 5 in this building. We're having a wildfire prevention meeting with a presentation on Woodside Fire and the Town Emergency Committee. So I think it should be very interesting. One of the things I've asked them to focus on is what have we learned from fires in Southern California that we can put to work up here, as well as more information about the inspections going on every day now, our homes, and what we can and can't do, particularly about that 5-foot difference from the house and where we're supposed to have all vegetation disappear. I'm having some very interesting conversations with a lot of people about that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, thank you for your 17 years of service and your leadership and your integrity and your honesty and your calm and steady hand. We will miss you as you move forward in the next chapter of your life, but we wish you all the best. Thank you, sir. And meeting adjourned.